Hello everybody, today we are going to cover other frequent responses to e4 move. First we shall cover so-called Alekhine defense, which starts with knight f6. So e4, knight f6. We shall choose to immediately push e5, which is probably the best move here. Immediately challenging the knight to move further. There are several responses here for black. Let us cover them. If knight e4, this is already a slight mistake. And we are going to play d4. Now there are many options for black. If knight c5, of course this is a mistake, and we simply take the knight. If black challenges our pawn with f6, I recommend that we play knight h3, not taking on f6, but knight f3. Okay, I step back. If h6 for black, then the best move is h4. Okay, if c5, challenging our d4 pawn, we shall play f3, attacking the knight on e4. That knight on e4 is pretty much trapped, but we need to play precisely depending on the black responses. So we step back. If developing move knight c6, which also attacks our pawns, we will again play f3, and there are no good options for black. Knight is lost here. If d6, we can also play f3, but I recommend that we first play bishop d3, attacking that knight this way, and also playing a decent developing move, bishop d3. If d5, we again play f3. Actually, f3 traps the knight, but in some situations we have a better move before that. Okay, I step back. If black decides to sacrifice the knight on f2, knight f2, we shall take it, accepting the sacrifice. And now again we are of course winning. This is not a sound sacrifice, and we will simply play developing moves. If knight c6, we play knight f3. and in most cases we will play knight f3 here. If g6, we again play knight f3. If d5, again knight f3. If c5, challenging our d4 pawn, I recommend that we now simply push that pawn, d5, with a very strong center now for white. And in some other cases like d6, we again play knight f3, and also after e6, also developing move knight f3. We actually have a piece for a pawn, and there is no some attack. Actually, black is not developed at all, so this is already winning for white. So I step back. After this move, after knight e4 for black and d4 for white, actually the best move for black is actually to play e6. e6, and now f3 is not good because black has a resource, queen h4, queen h4 check. So this was the only move that doesn't lose immediately. Actually, was e4, e6 for e4 for sorry, e6 for black. Knight f3 seems a reasonable move, but it's actually not, because black has now some resources. Actually, again, as we already saw earlier, actually knight on the edge of the board, knight h3 is here the best move. Okay, we step back, and we now cover another option for black. If black retreats his knight again to g8, so if knight g8, actually this was a better option than knight e4, retreating back to g8. And now we continue with a strong center d4, and actually we are leading in development, but black at least didn't lost the piece. So after c5, we shall now take c5. After g6, we shall simply play developing move knight f3. After f6, I recommend that we play bishop to d3, immediately targeting the king side, which is now already weakened with f6 move. So bishop d3. If knight c6, we have a few options. I recommend that we play knight f3 or knight c3 is maybe even better in this position. I step back. After d5, the best move is immediately challenge that pawn with c4. So d5, and we challenge the pawn with c4. Going back, after e6, we shall simply develop knight f3. And also after d6, we are not going to take, but again develop with knight f3, because taking on d6 actually improves the black's position. We simply want to play developing move knight f3, also protecting our central pawns. And finally, we step back to the main line of the Alekhine defense. Actually, the best move for black here is knight d5. Knight d5 is the main line of the Alekhine defense, and so now black shows that he knows at least two moves of this opening. We shall again take strong center with d4, and we are going to see several options for black, playing frequently on amateur and professional level. As always, we start with some weaker moves. Some players will play b5, which is already a mistake. We simply take that pawn. Bishop takes b5. Always watch for such possibilities in the opening. If c5, challenging our d4 pawn, we shall take. D takes c5. If knight c6, attacking our d4 pawn, of course it is currently protected with our queen, and this is actually a mistake already for black, because we can now play c4, and actually c4 traps one knight, it seems. So what can now black place? Two common responses are knight d to b4, knight d to b4, but we can simply play a3, challenging that knight, and actually the only move here is knight to a6, and we can now push b4, and actually actually there is no good move here for black. We have huge advantage if black somehow manages to save their knights. We will have a huge advantage in the development. Okay, it seems the only move that doesn't immediately lose the knight is moving one knight to b8 square. Okay, I step back. So if after our c4 attacking d5 knight, black decides to play knight b6, which is another move, but now d5 is the strong move. So d5 attacks that knight. It seems that we are losing the pawn this way. Knight can take e5, but then we have a strong c5 move, and actually black will take another pawn, but black will lose the knight. Okay, I step back. So if instead of knight c6, black tries to play e6, which is a better move now, we are going to simply develop again with knight f3. Going back, if knight immediately goes to safer place, knight b6, actually we are immediately going for that knight with a4. And finally, if black plays d6, which is the main line here, after d6, we are again pushing c4. And the only good move for black is knight b6. And here we are not going for that knight, but we are pushing further with f4. So we are now completely controlling the center with f4 move. Okay, that was all for Alec in defense. If you know the first few moves, you can really take a nice advantage early in the opening. And we are stepping back. So we shall now see at least few moves for the so-called Owen defense. If black plays b6 after e4, black plays b6. As always, I recommend to immediately control the center as long as you can. I will recommend e4, d4, controlling the center with two pawns. And now we will simply continue our development. This is actually not the best move for best open for black, but some players like to play it, and we shall cover a few moves that you can take early lead in the development here. So if bishop b7 challenging our e4 pawn, we shall recommend that we protect that pawn with bishop d3. This was actually the main line here of this Owen defense, and some other choices here. Some players like to play g6 first. After g6, I recommend knight c3. Also, if black plays a bishop a6, we shall simply take it. Of course, black will retake, but it's a solid position for white, already a solid positional advantage. And finally, if black plays e6, I recommend that we now develop with f3, knight f3. Okay, in all cases we have a solid advantage. We control the center, we develop our bishop to d3 or our knights, and we have a good position. Of course, we need to play carefully because there are many possible traps in this opening too. we step back to the so-called modern opening. Some players after e4 will play g6 and after our d4 controlling the center, they will immediately challenge that d4 pawn with bishop to g7. Other move that you can expect is if black first plays d6 move. In both cases, if black plays this d6 move or as already announced bishop to g7, I recommend that we develop first our c3 knight. We don't need to protect further d4 pawn because it is protected by the queen. Later we can develop our knight to f3 or our bishop to e3, protecting further this d4 if necessary. Okay, we shall step back and we shall go a little bit more deeply in the so-called perk defense. So if after e4 black plays d6, this is a so-called perk defense, but actually we shall cover many options for black. In this, some players like to play perk because there are really many possibilities for black in the perk, and it's not so huge advantage for white in the opening. So it's a solid opening for black. But immediately on the second move after our d4, black will have many options. So actually, I will not going more deeply. I will just cover all that possibilities and our third move response here. If black plays c5, we will simply take d takes c5. If knight c6 move, we will simply push our d pawn, immediately challenging that knight. So we immediately attack the c6 knight with d5. If black doesn't want that but plays knight to d7, we will simply further developing king side with natural knight f3 move. And in all other responses, you can play either knight f3 or knight c3. Let me see other options too. If black takes small center with e6, I again recommend knight f3. Going back, if c6 move, developing a little bit on the king side, we will also develop first on the king side. Although knight f3 or c4 is possible, I recommend knight c3 here. Okay, going back. Other options for black now are e5. After e5, our pawn on d4 is attacked. I recommend protecting further with knight f3. So knight f3 here. And two other moves, which are probably the main lines of the perk defense, are g6. There are a certain number of g6 players in many openings, fianchettoing the bishop to g7. After g6, I recommend knight c3 first, although there are other good options too. And finally, after knight f6, now knight c3 is almost a must because we are now protecting e4 pawn which is under attack. And that's a solid beginning of the perk defense. So you can enjoy this opening because after only knowing just first few moves, you can fight because you have a certain advantage, and if with careful play you will maybe lose that advantage if you don't know the opening, but you can fight at least for equality without good knowledge, without many knowledge here. And finally, we shall cover the last option for black, the so-called Scandinavian defense. If after e4, black plays d5. So this is the so-called Scandinavian defense. And in this Scandinavian defense, I recommend that you, of course, take that pawn. We don't have much options here. I recommend taking on d5. It's a good move for black. And now we will cover. We will now cover some options for black here. Black will most probably take with the queen. There are not much other options. Let me see first other options. If black decides to play e6, this is already a small mistake, and we can take that pawn, but better option is to play bishop b5 check. You can remember this idea also from some other openings. As long as we are allowed to play bishop b5 check, and black cannot stop easily with the pawn because of our now d5 pawn. This is almost always the good option. So bishop b5 check is now recommended. If on the other hand black plays c6, we now don't have such options, and I now recommend that we take the pawn. So d takes c6. And finally, if black decides to play knight f6, attacking our pawn, we shall actually not fight for that pawn because that pawn is attacked now twice. We don't have resources to save that pawn, d5 pawn, but we are continuing our development. I recommend d4. So d4, black will most probably take now immediately d5 pawn, but some players will play first some other moves. Let us see them. Bishop b5 is pretty common move. But again, we are allowed to play a bishop b5 check here. Also, black can now play e6 move. And now at this point, I recommend playing because now there are some other options when a knight is on f6. I recommend that we simply take the pawn. Actually, we are now allowed to be a pawn up. So we now simply take this. Also, if black plays c6, we are again allowed to be a pawn up. So we take d takes c6. And if black decides to take with the queen, d5, this is probably not the best move for black because we can immediately chase the queen with knight c3. So I recommend knight c3 chasing the queen. And also bishop to g5 is sometimes played, attacking our queen. You can stop this immediately with f3 pawn, but again I recommend to play first bishop b5 check. So before f3 I recommend to playing bishop b5 and see what will happen later. So I recommend bishop b5 a check here. And finally, as already announced, the main line is here simply knight takes d5, and we simply develop knight f3, developing the king side, protecting further the pawn on d4. So knight f3 is a natural move here and also a good move here. And finally, we are going to step back and to see the main line of the Scandinavian defense. So if immediately after we take on d5, black retakes with the queen. So queen takes d5 can be considered the main line of the Scandinavian defense. Although there are now many options and some players prefer to play knight f3, I recommend that we go with the main line, which is knight c3, immediately chasing that queen. And now we will see many options how to play further depending on the square to which the queen will go here. So let me see all options for black's queen now on the move number 3. So if black goes with the queen to d6, stepping just one square behind, I recommend that we go with d4, immediately controlling the center. And now there are also many responses for black. If black plays e6, we are allowed to there are several options here, but we are allowed to further attack the queen with knight e4, and I recommend that knight e4 move. If instead black plays e5, I recommend queen e2, the strong move, pinning that e5 pawn. So if black plays pawn to e5, we play queen e2, pinning the pawn. And we are already in a solid advantage actually here. Stepping back, some players, as we have already seen in other openings, like to play bishop to f5, attacking our c2 pawn. But there is no much of this idea here. So bishop to f5, we can actually play very strong queen to e3. Although we are leaving our c2 pawn to be taken, actually we are targeting b7 too, and the rook will be trapped. So black cannot afford taking on c2 here. So queen f3 here is a strong move. So we step back. If a6, after this move, which is not the best developing move for black, I will recommend g3, although I don't recommend frequently going into fianchetto. And now I will recommend g3 in this position. Also, black's queen is pointing in that direction, so we are somehow stopping further possible attacks with that queen at some point. So g3. Some other options. So we step back. Some other options for black here are c6. I recommend that we simply go with sorry, not this one. This will lose the pawn, but bishop to e3. So bishop to e3. Also, if knight c6 with further attack on our d4 pawn, we simply push the pawn to d5, immediately attacking the knight, and our pawn is protected by two pieces, and we are simply safe here and actually in a good position. And finally, if black plays knight f6, so developing with another knight, which is probably the best move here, we will also develop with knight f3. Okay, I will now step back to move number 3 and to see what happens if black's queen goes to e5 check. So if black plays queen e5 check. Well, we don't have much option, but we have a good move, bishop to e2, which is a solid place for the bishop, and also stopping the check. So bishop e2. And now there are also many possibilities for black here. If e6, I will immediately recommend knight b5. We are targeting c7 actually square. We are protected by our bishop, so knight b5 is a nice idea when allowed. Of course, we are not winning anything at the moment, but we have actually a nice play here. Okay, moving back. If black plays c6, which now stops knight to b5, we will go with d4, attacking the queen and controlling the center. If black decides to play another move with the queen, queen g5, targeting our g2 square, we will simply play a knight f3. It seems that we are leaving the pawn to be taken, but queen takes g2 is not an option because we have a strong rook g1 move, and the only place for the queen is h3. But then again we have some strong attacks to some strong attacks because we are a pawn down, but our pieces are targeting black's positions in many directions. So we can play d4, we can play bishop c4 targeting f7 square. We have many possibilities here. So this is for this is just a nice positions for strong positional players and also strong attackers here. You can try this opening. So we step back. So if black plays if black plays bishop to f5 now, we can again play d4, attacking the queen and controlling the center. If knight f6, then d4 is also possible, but I recommend now also developing our knight and also attacking the queen with knight f3 move. And finally, if black plays bishop to g4, we have several options, but d4 is the strongest move, attacking the queen, and our bishop on e2 is protected enough. So d4. I step back. So to another possibilities, if black also gives a check but from e6 square, it's probably the similar position, but with other options for black. We will again play bishop e2, stopping the check. And now there are really many possibilities for black, but in most positions we will simply play d4, further controlling the center and with further development. Let us see all options, what you can expect for various kind of players. If h5 move, we will play d4. If queen c6, if queen c6, we will not play d4 because this is a huge blunder. We can immediately win the queen with bishop b5. So queen c6 is targeting our g2 pawn, but this was a blunder, so we win the queen with this bishop b5 move. If black plays a6, we will play d4. If black plays queen to d7, we will play d4. If black plays g6, we will again play d4. If bishop to d7, we will play d4. If c6, we will play d4. If b6, we will play d4. If knight f6, we can also play d4 and it is a strong move. If queen g6, and now again black is targeting our g2 pawn. Now knight f3 is stronger. d4 is playable, but knight f3 is now stronger. And again, after queen takes g2, we have a rook g1, and actually this is not a good move for black. So it's winning for white if now black takes on g2. Okay. And finally, if knight c6, we can again play a d4. And we step back to see the last two options for black here. Black's queen is under attack, and the last two options, which are actually main lines here, are queen a5 and also retreating queen to d8. So players who know how to play this opening will most probably play queen e5 or queen d8. Let us cover those two moves. So after queen a5, we can actually play d4, and this is a good move. And now if black plays c5, immediately challenging that pawn, we will play knight f3, developing move and protecting that pawn on d4 further. If e6, I again recommend developing a move knight f3. We don't have much more at this point. If e5, I again recommend not to take the pawn, but to play knight f3. Protecting that pawn. We don't need to be afraid of pushing the pawn on e4 because we have enough space for our knight. Both knight e5 or knight g5 are okay. Also, we can pin the pawn with queen e2. So we have plenty of options here. I step back. If in this position black plays bishop f5, there are players who like that square for the bishop, so you can expect this move in many openings, bishop to f5. We will now simply play bishop to d2. This seems a little bit passive for white, but we have a possibility to play some discovered attacks on the queen at some point, so this is a good move here. We step back. If knight c6, We can immediately push the pawn chasing that knight, so d5 is a nice play here. If c6, we again have bishop d2 with possible discovered attacks on the queen. And finally, if knight f6, which is a main line here, we will also develop our knight f3. Okay, and we are not going further. You just need to know some ideas and careful play in this opening. So we will go back and to cover the last option, last reasonable option for queen, which is queen for black, moving the queen back to d8 square. Again, we are simply developing. We are first playing d4, and on the second move, we will most probably play knight f3, and in some cases, some other moves. So let us cover again possibilities for black. If you encounter g6 player, you can safely play knight f3. If knight c6, you can chase the knight again with d5. If you encounter bishop f5 players, this is now an interesting position. You can immediately attack that. This is an interesting variation. You can immediately play a g4 move, attacking that bishop. This can really be an interesting variation to play. Okay, moving back. If c6 move, then I recommend that we develop our knight to c4, targeting f7 square first. If e6, we don't have time to do that. I again recommend simply knight f3. And finally, probably the main line here is simply for black to develop knight f6, and we are going to again develop our knight to f3. And that will be all. So you really will not face those openings as frequently as some Sicilian defense or E5 and variants, or French or Caro-Kann defense, and it's simply okay that you know just first few moves how to play solid and how to gain some advantage immediately from the opening. Thank you for watching. I'm going to be back soon with opening a repertoire for black. It will be also very interesting to play against white. So we will see which are very good responses to how to encounter various moves by white. I will prefer Sicilian after e4 move, and we will also cover some other possibilities after d4 and other moves. See you soon.